That concludes our public participation and brings us to item number 13, which are actions necessary or appropriate on matters discussed in executive session. The first item we would take up would be item 3A, selected employment items shown in Exhibit A. Do I have a motion? Mr. Cates.
I make a motion that we approve selected employment items as presented in executive session, Exhibit A.
Do we have a second? Ms. Baumgartner seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. And we need a motion for 3B, which is 2018-19 reappointments shown in Exhibit B. Do I have a motion? Ms. Hammond.
I move that we approve Exhibit B, the 2018-2019 reappointments.
Have a second? Ms. Baumgartner seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimous. And those are the only items we need to consider there. Takes us to item number 14. Okay.
Oh, no, that's 14, I'm sorry.
All right. This takes us to item number 14, which is the approval of the contract for HVAC replacement at Lake Murray Elementary School. And I'll look for Ms. Hutchison has a motion on that. Thank you.
Thank you, I was just a little eager. I move that we award the project to replace heating, ventilation, and air conditioning Phase 3 at Lake Murray Elementary School minus alternate number 5.
We have a second. Ms. Hammond seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. Brings us to item number 15, which is the approval to name the Irmo Elementary School auditorium in memory of Mr. Francis W. Allen, shown in Exhibit C. I have a motion. Mr. Halterwanger.
Mr. Gaddard, I move to approve the name, the Irmo High School Auditorium in memory of Mr. Francis W. Allen, found in Exhibit C.
Have a second. Ms. Hutchison seconds. Any discussion?
Just as a point of clarification, I believe that's Irmo Elementary School. Did you say?
Irmo Elementary School Auditorium, yes.
I might have said it
I
right.
heard high school.
Okay. All right.
No, elementary.
Point noted. We got it. We're correct? Good, Ms. Stowers? Okay. All right. So any other questions, concerns? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. That brings us to item number 16, which is first reading approval of proposed revisions to Board Policy BEDH, public participation at meetings shown in Exhibit D. Do I have a motion? Ms. Hutchison.
I move that we give first reading approval of proposed revisions to Board Policy BEDH, public participation at meetings, as shown in Exhibit D.
We have a second. Mr. Cates, second. And we're now open for discussion, but I'd like to ask Ms. Goggins if she would briefly touch again on the reasons that we're taking a good look at this, and then we'll go to our discussion and our final vote on it.
Certainly. Well, first to add context and just a review to what we discussed at the last board meeting, the district administration was asked to take a look at policy BEDH regarding public participation. Acting on this request, we did reach out to several Midland school districts, and the results of that can be found in Exhibit D. And it is true that a lot of the districts allow for written communications or responses to questions, but they also allow the board to answer those during the board meeting or at the next board meeting as well. So currently our policy states that, quote, all questions provided in writing will receive a response by the next board meeting. The proposed change would state that board members may request that the administration respond to a particular question. The revision in the policy also states that any board member may request administration provide an oral response, either at that board meeting or the next. So in presenting this to you tonight, we'd like to note that FOI does already provide an effective means for the public to receive information to most of their requests. So The majority of the requests we receive are for documents or can be answered through documents. We also note that the administration receives daily questions from the public, and in a lot of cases, when we're able to, we respond to that within 24 hours. So we're already answering questions from the public. So whether or not there's a policy regarding or requiring us to respond to a written request, District 5 has been very transparent and is very responsive to citizens seeking information, and we will continue to do that as part of our commitment to the community we serve.
Thank you, Ms. Goggins. That will now take us to our discussion. Any questions of Ms. Goggins or just discussion on the policy? Ms. Hammond?
Yes, and I thank you, Ms. Goggins, because she helped me with some of my questions today. But I will reiterate them to the whole board. I too think that we have had a very transparent program, and I am proud that, of how we have handled it for all the years. My concern was, and this is what I asked you when I called you, my concern was if we depend totally on the FOIA. I do know that that is correct, that FOIA is for just really documents.
That's
which you
correct.
told me I'm correct on. And so I worried about somebody having a question, that's not, it doesn't have any document with it. And they would ask, like we've been doing all these years with the board. And I was worried about perception of the change. I understand and appreciate that certain people give us way more time and energy than we, need to do probably. But I did not want to change where the average citizen would not have the opportunity to come before us and get something answered in writing. And then I worried about will and may. We talked about that because it really makes a difference. And I also appreciate it being brought up for us to discuss because I'd like to hear what the board thinks about this. I've always been a little confused where we read the statement, and this is for years, I'm not talking about like tonight, about that the board has so much time, we'll answer the person, but we don't answer them up here, for lack of, maybe it's something we need to discuss, maybe it's something only Dr. Hefner knows. But we've had board members answer people. So I want us to be able to clarify that we can answer. I'm not saying I think it's wrong, but I'd always sat back even when it was something I might want to answer. I didn't think we were supposed to, unless it was the chair. But we have had numerous times we want to, maybe somebody said something that's not correct, so we want to get it corrected in public. And I get that. So I support that, but I'd love to get clarification on this new policy, whether we're saying any of us can answer something or we can, during public participation to clarify it. Because a long time ago, we used to the public could answer in the beginning and there was public participation at the end. And some of the other districts, or maybe one that I saw does that. So my thing is I'm not against the change, but I'm concerned about being driven by one or two people that we may feel ask us too many questions, and we give the signal that what we've been doing isn't good. And I think our policy right now is very good. So that's my concern, Mr. Gant.
I'm just going to weigh in slightly on this, and I think the thing we might be overlooking, and that is the fact we have a FOIA law that's been greatly enhanced. It provides an avenue, and it does relate to documents and things that exist. There are times when we have questions that come from the public at the microphone that submit for questions that are hypothetical questions. So then we have to figure out what is a question, what isn't a question. It's very expensive. Sometimes we have to have help to figure out. So I don't think it's an effort to be less transparent. It's probably an effort to be more specific, answer questions that are really questions. And as Ms. Goggins just said, you all answer questions daily. I've never seen anything that I've been copied on that came to our superintendent that I didn't see an answer that went to the person. So this isn't an end to anything. It's a meshing and an updating. We update policies all the time. FOIA was extremely updated. It gave many latitudes to get answers to issues. But I think this eliminates wasting money, hiring attorneys to figure out a question. And our policy put us in that we'll answer by the next meeting. And I think we hamstrung ourselves for that. Or a former board did. We weren't on the board when this was set up. Times have changed, this policy hadn't. And it's like we've done with every other policy that we have, we've reviewed and tried to make the best judgment with current laws how to do that. That's my take on it. Mr. Cates.
I just had some language kind of questions with the proposed policy. Said an individual desires to speak is requested to sign in. I think that was should be required. There's not an option for them not to sign in. And then it indicates that they would sign in beginning 15 minutes before the beginning of the meeting. And I'd like some notation there that once we've gavelled the meeting to order, that is closed.
We can make that change. Yes, sir.
Actually, Mr. Cates, I might suggest, think about your suggestion you just had. I think it's great. But when we gavel the meeting in, we actually need it closed maybe 5 minutes before we gavel in, because it's not time to gather up, present.
Right, and I'm not concerned about
Time.
however my concern is that we put a closing time or event that closes that.
Exactly.
And then it says with the Director of Community Services, but that may be old
That's old
language that we
language.
need to clean up as well. And then I believe it's the fourth paragraph, if one spokesperson has presented a matter, it's not necessary. Anyone may speak who has comments to add that are pertinent. Again, I think we need to indicate in there anyone who is appropriately signed in may speak, because that could be interpreted differently. And maybe there is some middle ground. I do think the FOIA, for the amount of questions that we get that are really more appropriately questions to handle through FOIA, as opposed to those general questions about programs or opportunities within the district, that feels a little different than when we're asked for documents and responses that take research time for staff. And FOIA is a mechanism that not only, it holds us accountable. In that way, as a district, you can document that you've followed those guidelines, and we know as a board that's being done.
Any other discussion? Ms. Hammond?
One perception, and this is not from anyone that's spoken tonight, or that, but I had a couple of calls from just public that and not that many people even read what we're going to talk about, but it can be seen, and please follow me. I know that's not what we're doing, but it can be seen too that when you do the FOIA, you know, you can, if it's and I went to that seminar when we had the meeting at the beach about the new FOIA laws. Some people have the perception, because it does cost, and we can, you know, now we can charge them
Recoup the
because of
cost.
the time it takes us. And then you can, and it's supposed to be charged by hourly of the person that has to do it. I mean, I've just read it. But it can be perceived that we're just saying, okay, if anybody's got any question, it has to come, you have to FOIA it. So it's a way that we are trying to circumvent. I know we're not, but Mr. Gant, it's like, and I put it in an email to you and to Dr. Hefner, that's my fear of this. Not what we're doing, but changing it from will to may. Then we can, by the person that the people in the public could feel that I'm hurt by the people that abuse it. So that's my problem with the change.
Can I just say, I'm not sure where you're talking about will to may.
Well, now, that's what, I got that from, if you'll explain it, Ms. Coggins. She said that right now we will answer people, because we're not saying you can't come answer questions. I get that. That was one of the things I wanted to clarify. A person can come, right? Am I right, Ms. Coggins? They can come, sign up just like we did. But instead of saying we will answer them, we want to change it to may.
It
Am
now
I-
says any board member may request the administration to provide an oral response to the questions asked.
So that's where the may is.
And previously, or the current policy says all question provided in writing will receive.
And that's a really
response.
big difference. And it may be that if you don't like what the speaker's saying, you don't want to answer them. Or if you feel they're wrong. I mean, I just feel like it puts the board at a disadvantage. That's just me. That's just my opinion.
Ms.
I think
Gog-
we've been very fair what we do right now.
Ms. Goggins, will you direct us to the paragraph that she's talking about? I think there's a little bit of
Yeah, I
a
don't see
misinterpretation there.
So the question, the sentence she's talking about just says all questions provided in writing will receive a response. by the
Last
ne-
paragraph, first
Yes,
page.
Correct,
Which is, most of that struck through.
correct.
Right. Okay.
To now say that any board member may request the administration to provide an oral response to the questions asked, and then during public participation at the next meeting of the board.
Right.
So will to may.
Right.
But I would reiterate that we're changing will to may. It's not a substitution of the words, it's just a rephrasing of it. And it now says that the board may request that the administration provide oral response. So that's, I think, an opportunity for us to clarify to the public that we are still willing to respond to any questions they ask, and the board may direct administrators to do that.
Right. Mr. Hawthorne?
No, I think there are times, I think Ms. Hammond may have alluded to, I think there are times when a question needs to be answered now, while
Absolutely.
we're here. I don't mean everybody trying to answer a question. We have a board chair, I think we can refer that to, that's his or her authority to do that. Therefore, it would eliminate, you going out having to respond to a question weeks later. If there's something that can be addressed now, particularly if there's something that's incorrect, I believe in correcting it now. Let's correct it now, and then you have your question answered. So I think you mentioned that earlier. I agree with that, and I mentioned that before. If it's something that we need to address now, again, I don't believe everybody, all 7 members, need to respond. We have a board chair or whoever's acting in his or her capacity. If they have the answer, then answer the question, and we move on.
And as it's currently written, members of the public may think they need to submit a written list of questions in order to get them answered.
And I believe
Them to
in one
think
of
that.
one of our earlier meetings, you mentioned, if my memory serves me correctly, the number of FOIA requests you've gotten this year was approaching 100 or something, 90 something, I believe may have been.
Yes,
So
sir.
you're getting a lot of requests, sounds like.
We are, yes,
So
sir.
that's being handled, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Ms. Hutchinson?
Thank you. One, I have not gotten any phone calls or anybody asking me about this policy change. And I do think that most people realize that the board or the administration is very willing to answer questions. That's been our policy. And sometimes people call us directly. I mean, we are representatives of the people. And so our phone numbers, contact information is out there for them to ask us. So I think there are plenty of avenues, and I think the average person believes that the administration and the board are doing things that are best for the school district, and there's nothing to hide. I do hope that the presentation or the coverage, the media coverage, Mr. Dozier, for this is handled fairly, because I do think that that could certainly taint what we're trying to do is to get rid of duplication and save time, valuable time and money of our administration. So I would request that you make, if you would, ask our chairman for some information so we have, or Ms. Coggins, because it's very important that the reporting of this is fair and accurate, because this is certainly makes perfect sense, and I think the public would appreciate the fact that we are giving our staff a reasonable way to continue working, continue doing the work that we've hired them to do and that we're paying them to do, instead of unnecessary duplication and unnecessary work. So I'm in total support of this policy with some of the tweaks we might make.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Ms. Baumgartner?
There are times that we get requests that are not even in a document, that don't that have to have research in order to get, or to respond that there is no document because it's not a question that even deals with the running of the school. So I think a lot of times the questions asked are not generated, or not something that is FOIable because there's not a document. And I think a lot of times we get a lot of these questions. I think somebody mentioned something that's theoretical. And I do support trying to make it clearer. So thank you, Ms. Coggins.
Dr. Hefner?
I just wanted to reflect, I think one of the biggest problems that I've encountered with the policy that we currently have in place is the directive that we answer questions by the next board meeting. Sometimes that's not a problem, but there have been times when we've been inundated with questions on a single meeting, and the questions are complicated and require a lot of time and effort to respond to them. And therefore, I prefer the commitment that we may answer them if we are able to. And of course, if it's a FOIable item, we will answer it in accordance with the law. But I do think we need that flexibility. It's when you get a huge stack of questions, you can't bring in a part-time temporary Kelly substitute to answer those questions. There are only a few people who can answer them, and there's a limitation on time. So I think from my standpoint, the biggest thing is we need the flexibility. It's not that we're not going to respond. We need the time to prepare the response and respond accurately and thoughtfully.
Great points. Any other, Ms. Hammond?
Well, as an answer to that thought from Dr. Hefner, could the board entertain the idea of giving longer time rather than those 10 days? Now, I'm not talking about FOIA stuff, because that's a law. But I'm talking about just for questions that we can answer. Or Mr. Hawthorne's idea that, many of them, maybe they could be answered, right, because it could be wrong information that was said, and we could answer it immediately and straighten it out.
Well,
You don't think that would save us time?
Well, it certainly could if it's answerable. But I'll tell you, in my current status, if the question comes and I'm comfortable with it,
You do it.
I would answer it. If I'm not comfortable, I may, if I thought Dr. Hefner was, I may ask Dr. Hefner. But I don't need to answer it and not know the facts.
No, I
And
agree
then,
with that.
to what you said at first, this board can entertain anything they like to, more time, whatever. I think what Dr. Hefner said volumes to me. In most cases, it's going to be answered, but it takes the clock off of it. In some cases, if it's a hypothetical this and that, or if it sets 3 conditions and then asks the question and none of the 2 or 3 conditions exist, then you're in an expensive process to try to figure it out. So I think therein lies some issues. Just like in your classroom, and we'd have something that covers it, but in your classroom, occasionally, there's a student or 2 or on the recess ground that will ruin it for everybody. And some of this is a direct reflection of just that. So that is what it is. It's the truth. That's transparent. That's where we are. Mr. Cates.
I know sometimes I get accused of not paying attention, but I really am looking at it. Just as a quick look, again, as I said here, a quick look, back through questions that have been asked back to April. With the exception of a few of the questions during the Amex Ferry discussion, most of the questions are more appropriately handled through FOIA.
Correct.
Or they're asking you, asking someone to give an answer as to why the board did something or the opinion of a board action. And it may be that while we are in the midst of those type of events, such as Amex Ferry, through the, or should I say, purchase of property, the building of a school, we choose to handle those differently when we have a working session or more of a community forum, but that doesn't mean we have to have a policy that addresses those kind of one-off events. I don't minimize them, but those events that are not as frequent, we're not writing a policy for that. So I would never want to limit someone's ability to ask a question. I want to make sure people are heard. I know for myself, that's one of the most frustrating things. I tell people all the time, I don't have to be agreed with, I just have to be heard. I don't see anything that limits someone's ability to be heard in this, and I think with some modifications, we can come up with a policy that the other districts around us will model their response to this issue as well. So thank you for the hard work that's gone into this.
And I'd remind the board, this is our first reading. We've already tweaked it somewhat. We'll have more chances to tweak. So without further discussion, if there's none, we need to take a vote on this first reading. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? All those abstaining?
So, are you going to take a vote for abstain?
Yes. Are you abstaining? So we had 5 in favor, 1 abstain. So thank you very much. So that moves us to item number 17, which is our first reading approval of the proposed fiscal year 18-19 general fund budget shown in Exhibit E. And Mr. Richardson, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Gant, members of the board. I'm here tonight to once again go over the proposed general fund budget for fiscal year 2019. And as usual, I do my little disclaimer at the beginning, but I just want to let you know what's in here and what we're looking at. But the information that I'm about to go over is information that was approved by the Senate Finance Committee on March 28th of this year. Since we have done this PowerPoint and presented a budget to you as well, there's also been, the full Senate has passed the budget last Thursday, which was the 12th, I guess it was. So there wasn't much changes from what I'm about to present to you, so I feel like we're in pretty decent shape right now. I do want to, remind you that anything that I go over in this PowerPoint is also contained in this blue booklet that I provided to you, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have from the detail that's in here. The Senate Finance Committee has done some different things than what the House had originally proposed. The information that I provided in the discussion reading of the budget was based on the House appropriations. Some of the major differences, I guess the major difference in this version of the Appropriations Act and what the House proposed is that the House had proposed a 2% cost of living allowance for teachers. However, the Senate Finance has come back and subsequently the House has actually reduced that to a 1% cost of living for teachers. The House had provided us with a $2,425 base student cost. The Senate, however, has given us $60 additional on the base student cost to bring it to $2,485. Everything else that you're looking at on this page is the same. This slide that I'm showing now is a little bit different than one I provided to you last week. I updated this morning, just to kind of give you an idea of where we stand. All those shaded items that you see up there, looks pink. It was supposed to be red, but it looks pink from here, is actually the same in both versions of the budget that we currently have. So what does that mean? Well, that means that they're sort of locked in, basically. So when ultimately a conference committee gets a hold of this budget and work everything out, this will be included, these items will be included in the conference report. Where we are right now is the Senate has passed this budget. It will go back to the House for concurrence, or as we expect, that the House will not concur with what the Senate has provided. So the House will make their amendments to the Senate version, send it back to the Senate. They will probably non-concur, and then we'll be in conference committee, which is typical. What we have here is, I'm going to hit briefly on these things, but I just want you to understand that there is an increase to the state minimum salary schedule from $30,000 to $32,000. Both versions of the budget contain that. The increase to the base student cost, like I mentioned earlier, is based on the Senate Finance Committee and the Senate. The 1% teacher salary increase is also part of what the Senate has proposed. Department of Education was getting some money to help with computer security. The South Carolina Public Charter School Districts get an additional $13.1 million to maintain their piece of the base student cost. There was a $1 million added to this budget in the Senate for exceptional needs private school tuition tax credit. The Senate also had an additional $10 million for school bus lease replacement, which is a little bit different. They weren't purchasing, they were proposing to lease those buses. Like I said, both versions contain the $59.4 million of recurring money to help with the cost, or actually cover the cost for the state employee health insurance increase. That just means that our employees will not have to pay an additional premiums, and they'll have a modest increase in co-pays, we suspect. All of that will be paid by the district, so it's the employer part that is funding. Also have an additional $36.6 million in the budget to help offset the 1% state retirement employer contribution rate increase as well. And then there was $2 million put in for career and technology centers. There's one item that's not on here, and it's really not directly budget related, but I think you ought to know about it. And it's indirectly related to the budget, but has to do with the retirement earnings limitation. The House did not address it in their version of the budget. The Senate, however, did address it, but I'm not sure they helped us a whole lot, because what they've done is added a provision that will not allow allow a school district or a state agency to hire anybody through a third party, i.e. a temp agency, to get around the earnings cap limitation. I'm not sure how that's going to impact us now, because of course substitutes are paid through temporary service. If we have some retirees that come back, that may be viewed as we're trying to get around the earnings limitation. I just don't know where that stands right now, but I am concerned about it, so I thought you should know about it. So, as I mentioned, these are the things that we're considering in this budget. The 1% increase in their employer contributions for retirement. We've got the health insurance increase, premium increases of 7.4%. We've got the mandated 1% cost of living allowance for teachers. We also have the 1% in there for all of our district employees. We have step increases for all eligible employees. Any additional staff that we need to meet our board policies to maintain our student-teacher ratios. We also have some reductions, the main one being this item, the non-recurring expenditures for the Terry payout that we budgeted for in the current year. As you know, Terry is ending at the end of June this year, and we expect to have quite a large leave payout for that, so we did budget for that. Also considering the middle school expansion at Chapin, and I think I mentioned to you earlier, you may not recall, but we talked about poverty index and what that means. The poverty index changed as being, that is being implemented or proposed to be implemented, will actually reduce the number of weighted pupil units statewide because poverty, or districts won't be as povertous, is that a word? So what that does is free up about $22 million in the EFA to, I just made up a
Like
word.
that.
From Dr. Melton's look, that was not a word. Yes.
Not a word, sir.
Impoverished, okay, I like povertist, that was good, that was good. I forgot what I was talking about now. The,
Really well.
but what that did was redirect $22 million. I guess it was $22 million on the table that was not going to go to school districts any longer because it was no longer needed based on the way the EFA formula works. So they redirected that $22 million back to the base student cost, which increases the base student cost by approximately $33. But the Senate also put some additional money in, as I talked about on the prior screen, to get us up to an additional $60 on the base student cost. Now, what do we have in this budget? A lot of little teeny things that I'm having a hard time reading.
You having a hard time.
All right, sorry, this is sort of difficult to read from back here.
Could you make
But
this?
there are some changes in this, in what you're looking at here, as opposed to what I presented to you based in the last board meeting for the budget discussion. But we have a guidance counselor added, an additional guidance counselor. We have 3 behavioral interventionists, 3 academic interventionists, 1 math interventionist at Irma Middle School. We have 4 career development facilitators. Part of that is funded through the EIA, so that's not, the full salaries are not totally impacting the general fund. We have an additional 1.5 teachers as well. And then support staff, we have 3.2 teaching assistants, an additional half-time school nurse, and an additional custodian. We also have since found out that we've got some additional money we're going to be paying for our school resource officers. We've added an additional resource officer for the Center for Advanced Technical Studies. We've getting approximately $165,000 cost increase passed on to us for school resource officers in Richland County. We have additional contracted mental health case managers. We have increased contract days for our 3 district safety officers. We are proposing to eliminate the 12% salary reduction for returning retirees. This is a big item here, and probably one of the most commented things we've ever done in this district since I've been here, and that is a $500 loyalty bonus for all of our district employees, which is a non-recurring expenditure that we have currently included in here. And then, of course, all of our salary increases, the cost of living step, credential, and all of that, to make up an increase in our expenditures of $5.4 million, or 3%. Please understand that these additions, what I don't have listed here is some of the reductions that we've made in our budget. I think we've done a pretty decent job over the last few years of trying to get some of our costs controlled. The fact that we're not having to budget for the Terry payout is obviously a big item that helps us this year. We've done a pretty good job of getting some of our other costs, some of our supplemental salaries that we have been paying out. We've done a pretty good job of reeling those in, so I think we're starting to see the benefit of some of that now, and that's why, as you probably hear a lot of school districts talk about how bad of a budget year it is. Now, I'm not going to say this is a great budget year, but I am optimistic that this one is not going to be as bad as it could have been for a number of reasons. But that $5.4 million increase in our budget right there could easily be in the $8 million range. Here are our proposed expenditures, and like I said, all the detail for that is in this blue booklet. But we are looking at our salaries of $115,723,298. Of course, our fringe benefits, $49,030,798. Contracted services, $12,620,046. Supplies and materials, $8,626,172. Other objects, Mr. Haltwanger, that is where we pay for a lot of our advanced ed and other type of memberships. and any transfers of $287,897 for a total of $187,342,054. This is just a graph showing how those are broken out. And here's the other side of the equation, the revenue. It's still a little early. I'm gonna show you some things here in a minute, but I just want you to keep in mind it's still a little early. There's still a lot of information that we're gonna probably be getting, especially when it comes to our local taxes. That will, local taxes and state dollars as well, I should say, that hopefully will help the bottom line before this is all said and done when we come back to you in May for final approval of our budget. We're currently looking for, from local sources, $68,966,053. Our state revenue of $111,297,220. I do want to mention one thing on here. When you see property tax relief tier 3, that is the Act 388 money that everybody's familiar with that we receive on an annual basis. When I spoke to you earlier about the change in the methodology, the calculation for poverty, well, it also affects this. So I don't know what the effect of the new poverty calculation is going to be on the Tier 3 tax relief. However, I can tell you it's probably approximately going to be about the same amount of money we gained through the increased cost in the base student cost when they changed the poverty there. Somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000, I'm guessing. So it's basically a wash. And then all of our other projected general fund revenue of $5,885,911. The biggest piece of that is the transfer from EIA. That includes the additional money to fund the 1% teacher salary increase, for a grand total of $186,149,184. And for those of you who are math whizzes, you'll probably notice that my percentages don't add. I will draw it is a little rounding error there. It should be 3.16 and 3.01 do not add up to 3.16. Sorry, I caught that after I said this to you. And just broke it down for you, just so you can see it on a graph. Here's the bottom line. I'm going to come back to this screen, if that's okay with you. I want to get past this one, and I'll come back to it and discuss this briefly. This is the allowable millage increase for the district using the consumer price increase of 2.13%, our population growth in the district of 0.82% for a total allowable percentage increase of 2.95%, which equates to approximately 7.6 mils that if needed, the district could raise millage. All right, here's some dates of this I wanted you to remember. Obviously, right now, the Senate has finished now, obviously. They finished on the 12th. And so I'm suspecting the House will probably take this up. They've got basically 2 weeks, I guess, to do their thing and get it back to the Senate. Here's our budget calendar. Obviously, tonight's being the first reading, but I wanted to draw your attention to May 21st is where we'll be asking for final reading on our general fund budget. So, that being said, we've got a little bit of time to try to work out the kinks and determine get a little bit better handle on what our revenue is going to be. So, that's where I'm going to go back to this screen. You're looking at a negative $1.2 million roughly of our revenue, our expenditures over our revenue. This is not really concerning to me at this point in time. I think by the time we get our numbers hammered out a little bit better, that we're going to be a lot closer. I'm not saying we're not going to have a deficit, but what I am saying is that I think it's going to be a little bit better picture, hopefully. It could get worse. In that case, then all bets are off, but I think it'll be a little bit better picture than what we're looking at right here. And obviously, as I showed you earlier, we've got approximately $1.4 million of non-recurring cost in this budget So I would not be too concerned if we went with a slight deficit. That, Mr. Chairman, is the end of my presentation, but I'll be glad to try to answer any questions.
Ms. Baumgartner.
I wanted, before we, as we're getting into this budget, I wanted Dr. Melton to explain the increase in certain personnel, and why, why we see the need. If you don't mind.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity, Ms. Baumgardner. We as an executive staff, when I say we, I'm inclusive of Mr. Giuliano that I see back towards the back, have been meeting to discuss what our priorities are going to be for the coming year. We have concerns about the physical health, the mental health, the social support that we're giving to students, but also to staff. So in listening to our teachers, they've been very clear to us to say we need some support for our students, but also for some staff. So the career development facilitators, the CDFs that you saw referenced, there are some funds from the State Department for that. We'd like to take advantage of that to make sure that we can take some weight off of school counselors so that they can work directly with students in our secondary schools, allowing the CDF to come in and work specifically with those career development skills that are very important for our students. But meanwhile, that takes time that the counselor has to decide to have CDF responsibilities of developing the career, and then also have needs for our students to have small groups or one-on-one sessions or some parent conversations. So we'd like to take some of that burden away from our counselors so they can really focus on the counseling services. Dr. Harris has worked closely with our partners to make sure that we can increase for our physical safety. Our SRO, you saw that for the center. You also saw an increase for mental health services. We have heard a plea from our principals and from our teachers that we definitely need to increase the services that we're currently offering to our students. Of course, there's always an academic need. So you saw some FTE specifically aligned to where those needs have been identified, but will also be identified based on the conclusion of state assessments that are coming up from elementary all the way up through high schools. So we're trying to make sure that we're personalizing what is needed in each site, but also making sure that we're looking at the physical health, the mental health, the social emotional health of our students with support for staff, but also sensitivity to the academic needs.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Ms. Hammond.
That's great to hear that. I can tell you the mental health, as I know Ms. Baumgardner and Mr. Cates and Mr. Gant and I, when we went to the day at the Capitol, that was something we let every lawmaker
Thank
hear.
you.
School safety is a top priority everywhere, and especially with the events that have happened. And I can't tell people enough how mental health plays into that majorly. But my question was, if I can ask this, I'm just interested, it kind of goes with this, but where we've got an additional 3 behavioral interventionists, it's on this page, that's in the proposed budget. Do we have them at every school? It just made me ask that.
No, ma'am, and I'll fill that, Ms. Richardson, if you don't mind.
Because this is 3 more, right?
Well, they're a little different. You think sometimes of our Title I elementary schools, we have what we call expectation coaches.
Okay, that's what
These behavior interventionists are different than that. These will be certified positions, people who have had specialized training of working with students who need to improve behavior skills, but also working with those teachers who have been assigned these students. Imagine it's a classroom where a child is self-contained, or imagine it's a classroom where a child has 4 different classes on every other day. So it's making sure that this behavior person is involved with the teacher or the team of teachers that are serving this student. And last budget, you all approved for us a behavior position. Lucy Bailey has actually filled that, and we placed it within special services. But through her position, she works closely with Dr. Harrison, with Ms. Brown, who I saw here earlier tonight. I can't see her now. There she is back there. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Mr. Richardson was blocking you. We've been working closely together between departments to make sure that what Mrs. Bailey does for professional development, these positions can then come into where the need is identified. Dr. Jakes has been having staffing conversations with each principal since January. As she continues to hear the needs, we want to make sure that we respond to what the behavioral identified needs are. But this would not be a position comparable with expectations coaches, because those are paraprofessionals, as opposed to these will be certified people of specialty to really intervene and make a difference for student behavior.
And they are certified staff?
They would be
They
certified,
would
yes,
be.
ma'am.
Okay.
That is our recommendation.
And are these 3, would they be middle or high school, or they would move around?
It would depend. We would probably recommend one in a middle level, one in a high school level, and then one to float, working closely with Ms. Bailey. But I think it'd be negligent for me to say to you, we would definitely place this person here tonight, because that too will be based on data. Dr. Harris helps us watch those kind of behavior information, and depending on the conferences that he and Ms. Brown have with families, we want to be responsive to the needs, and as students are promoted, where might we need the resources? And then mobility, let's move them around and not say this person is situated here for the entire school year, when the need may not be warranted there, it may be down the street someplace else.
Well, I just want you to know, I'm excited about that in there. And
Thank you.
I know how much that's needed. And on the same page, Mr. Grant, if I can ask, and that'll be my questions together. Additional school resource, I know that at the CATS, but the increased with Richland County, had we been doing, that's another thing we learned at the State House about, they want us to negotiate, which we've been doing with Lexington County and Richland. Is this, did we used to go 50-50 with Richland County? We paid 50, they paid 50, or are we the 75-25?
Well, we're 75-25 in Lexington County. If I'm not mistaken, and Dr. Harris could probably answer this better than me, but Richland County actually had a grant that this is now over.
I got you. So that's this increase is from,
That is part of the grant that we currently have with Richland County. And then go back to the question, we do have a 75-25 split with Lexington County, 50-50 split with Richland County. The increase that you see here that's identified under the Richland County, the 65,000 is in reference to the grant that we do have, as well as additional costs related to their increases in health, retirement, and cost of living and things of that nature, as well as other administrative costs.
so is Richland still 50-50?
They are still 50-50
50-50.
Richland County, that's
We
correct.
need to work on Lexington. They need to be as good as Richland.
Lots of work like that,
Gotcha.
that's correct.
Okay. My plan.
Just a comment.
Mr. Hawthorne.
Yeah. Just a comment. Comment really, Mr. Richardson. I'm happy to see that you have proposed the $500 loyalty bonus again for employees. I think it's one thing to tell an employee you're doing a good job. It's entirely another, something different to show them some tangible thank you and appreciation for the great job that they're doing. Again, I say proposed, but at least it's in here, and you've considered it. We appreciate you doing that, and you and your staff.
I wish I could take all the credit, but obviously there was a lot of thought that went into that. But I can tell you that has been probably one of the most positive things that we've done in this district since I've been here. I know we got more positive comments from that. So just thank you.
Dr. Milton, I guess I addressed this to you. I appreciate the fact that you all are identifying areas that we know we need help. And we need to know that as a board. But a few years ago, we added SROs, we've done a pre-K program, but things that enhance our students and their learning. And then this whole issue of mental health and just our society is changing. So I would encourage you, and I know Mr. Giuliani is directly involved in this, but look at our schools, look at our needs, and share it with us. If maybe it's not funded all the way this year, then at least we're working at it. Mr. Cates and I think I'm not even sure it was the last Parents Advisory Cabinet, but the plans, we were talking to Mr. Harris, we just had one of the many tragedies that have happened so many places, but what we heard parents around that table talking about, it's great that we've got a plan how to react to a bad situation. We really want to see resources and people put toward the mental issues to stop it or to address it so we can make good citizens out of people that have real issues. So I would encourage you to continue to look at this. We're not through with this budget.
Thank you.
And Mr. Giuliani, please continue to look at it because it's real. Some of what we all see on TV and happens everywhere does not seem real, but it is. So I applaud you for bringing that forward, but continue to examine it. And Mr. Richardson, I appreciate you working so hard on getting this budget in line to maybe do some of those vital things. So appreciate that. But thank you. Anything else on this one? We hadn't had a motion yet, I don't believe, or have I lost track? Ms. Towers, we had a motion? No, great. So I would entertain a motion that we give first reading approval of the fiscal year 18-19 general fund budget shown in Exhibit E. Ms. Hutchison.
I move that we give first reading approval of proposed fiscal year 18-19 general fund budget as shown in Exhibit E.
Thank you. Ms. Hammond seconds. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. So thank you very much. Great presentation. Brings us to our discussion agenda, which is a proposed board meeting schedule for 2018-19, shown in Exhibit F.